Every visit starts with a smile, but every smile hides a quiet tension that neither of us can ignore. The bright morning sun cast a warm glow over the suburban street, turning the familiar path to her house into something almost magical. The 22-year-old man's footsteps were steady but slightly hesitant, a flutter of anticipation in his chest that he could barely contain. He had walked past her house countless times before, but today felt different. Today, he would see her again, the 40-year-old American Caucasian widow next door, and somehow, even in the short moments they shared before, his heart always betrayed him with a little jump. She opened the door before he could knock, her presence commanding yet gentle. Long black hair fell in soft waves over her lightly tanned shoulders, a few stray strands catching the sunlight like threads of gold. Subtle freckles dotted her cheeks and nose, and soft laugh lines around her dark brown eyes deepened when she smiled. Her curvy figure, graceful and poised, was dressed in a flowing light blue blouse tucked into beige pants, casual yet effortlessly elegant. Even in that simple attire, she radiated confidence, warmth, and a quiet allure that made the air between them feel charged with potential. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying a melodic warmth that made his chest tighten. Her dark brown eyes held curiosity, amusement, and something unspoken, a recognition of the effect she had on him, perhaps even a hint of anticipation. He returned her greeting, voice catching slightly, aware that the polite handshake he offered might linger just a fraction too long, fingers brushing hers with an almost imperceptible warmth. The small porch felt intimate under the bright sunlight. Potted plants lined the railing, a small rocking chair sat invitingly in the corner, and the soft hum of neighborhood life served as a backdrop. Each element of the setting seemed to heighten his awareness, the slight creak of the porch boards under his weight, the scent of fresh flowers mingling with the faint trace of her perfume, the way the sunlight accentuated the warm tones of her skin. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to stretch. He noticed the way her shoulders shifted slightly as she leaned on the doorframe, the subtle tilt of her head, the small movements of her hands as she gestured politely. Each gesture, though ordinary, carried an understated elegance, a rhythm of familiarity and grace that drew his gaze. Even before a word was exchanged, the tension between them was palpable yet gentle, like a string pulled taut without snapping. He felt the quiet pull of curiosity, attraction, and admiration, balanced by an instinctive awareness of propriety. The bright, cheerful setting softened the intensity, making it feel like a tender, human moment rather than something overwhelming. As he finally stepped closer, offering a polite but hesitant smile, she returned it with a soft tilt of her head. That single moment, a handshake, a glance, a shared smile in the bright morning light, established the quiet rhythm of connection between them. It was subtle, unspoken, and powerful, the beginning of a slow-burn relationship defined not by grand gestures, but by the delicate interplay of presence, warmth, and the magnetic tension of mutual awareness. This was the first chapter of their shared story, a moment that lingered not just in the bright sunlight, but in the sudden, fluttering awareness of hearts beginning to notice each other. Quietly and irrevocably, the door closed softly behind him, and the bright morning light spilled across the tidy living room. The 22-year-old man followed her inside, aware of the subtle shift in energy the moment he crossed the threshold. The 40-year-old American Caucasian widow moved with effortless grace, her long black hair falling over her shoulders in soft waves, catching the sunlight that streamed through the windows. Lightly tanned skin glowed warmly, accented by subtle freckles across her nose and cheeks, while soft laugh lines framed her expressive dark brown eyes. Her curvy figure, casual yet refined in a light blue blouse and beige pants, radiated quiet confidence. Even the smallest gestures, the tilt of her head, the gentle sway of her shoulders, drew his attention without feeling intrusive. She gestured toward a small coffee table, where 2 steaming cups of tea rested, inviting him to sit. As he reached to accept the cup, their fingers brushed, the fleeting contact warm and electric, leaving a lingering awareness of her presence. The scent of fresh tea mingled with the subtle trace of her perfume, floral and comforting, and he found himself momentarily distracted by the combination of warmth, scent, and proximity. Their conversation began lightly, casual remarks about the neighborhood, the morning's weather, the small joys and inconveniences of daily life. But beneath the surface, the dialogue took on a quiet intimacy. She shared stories of her late husband with a gentle smile, the memory of loss softened by gratitude for shared moments. He listened attentively, leaning slightly forward, hands resting lightly on his knees, consciously aware of the soft glow of sunlight across her skin. The atmosphere was bright and warm, but the undercurrent of emotion, unspoken yet palpable, created a subtle tension that neither ignored nor forced. Every pause in the conversation became an opportunity for connection, a glance that lingered, a small laugh, the soft shifting of hands as they rested close to one another on the table. The living room itself reflected their dynamic. Sunlight bounced off pale walls, casting soft shadows over framed photographs and a small shelf of books. A gentle breeze stirred the curtains, brushing lightly against the window and carrying the scent of blooming flowers from outside. These details, mundane yet vivid, grounded their conversation in reality while highlighting the intimacy of the moment. She asked him questions about his own life, his work, hobbies, little frustrations, and small triumphs, and he found himself revealing more than he expected. Her attentive gaze, dark brown eyes warm and slightly teasing, made him feel seen, not just as a neighbor but as someone worth knowing. When he hesitated, she offered a soft, reassuring smile, the corners of her lips curving gently, the faint laugh lines deepening, conveying empathy and encouragement. By the time the cups were empty, a quiet understanding had blossomed between them. What began as casual small talk had evolved into shared reflection, a delicate dance of words and glances that hinted at trust, curiosity, and an emerging connection. Their presence together, bright, human, warm, had transformed the room into a space of subtle intimacy, where every gesture, every glance, and every breath carried meaning. It was a slow, measured beginning, a foundational moment where emotional awareness intertwined with quiet attraction. The story of their connection was building gently, like sunlight stretching across the room, illuminating both the familiar and the newly discovered in ways that left him wanting more. Even as the morning passed softly around them, the soft sunlight filtered through the bright living room, casting a golden glow over the 22-year-old man and the 40-year-old American Caucasian widow as they settled into the small sofa together. He had brought up a minor mishap from his week, a story that initially felt trivial, but her reaction transformed it into something unexpectedly vivid. Her long black hair fell over her shoulders in soft waves, catching the light, framing her face with a natural elegance. Her lightly tanned skin, accented by subtle freckles across her nose and cheeks, seemed to radiate warmth as she laughed, soft laugh lines around her dark brown eyes deepening, creating an image both inviting and human. Her laugh was melodic, carrying a gentle, infectious quality that made him smile in response, feeling a lightness he hadn't anticipated. As she gestured to emphasize a point, their hands brushed briefly, a fleeting contact that sent an electric tingle through his fingertips. It was accidental, entirely natural, yet it carried an undeniable weight, a subtle spark that lingered longer than the touch itself. His chest tightened slightly, awareness sharpening with every small movement, every soft shift of her posture. The bright room, bathed in sunlight, seemed to shrink around them, heightening the intensity of this simple, innocent moment. He noticed every detail. The gentle sway of her curvy figure as she leaned back, the graceful tilt of her head, and the slight movement of her fingers as they lingered in the air after the accidental touch. Even the faint floral scent of her perfume seemed more pronounced in this intimacy, mingling with the light breeze flowing through the open window. Each sensory cue, the warmth of her hand, the subtle shimmer of sunlight on her skin, the soft sound of her laughter, created a rich tapestry that deepened his emotional engagement, making him keenly aware of their connection. The conversation, still light-hearted, carried an undercurrent of something unspoken. They both recognized the quiet tension that had begun to form, subtle yet palpable, layered beneath laughter and casual dialogue. His responses felt slower, more deliberate, as if measuring the right distance between politeness and closeness. Her glances held an extra weight, dark brown eyes flicking toward him with curiosity, amusement, and a hint of invitation, but never overstepping boundaries. The room's brightness accentuated everything, from the soft shadows along her cheeks to the gentle curve of her shoulders, from the warm hue of the sunlight reflecting off the polished wooden floor to the faint shimmer in her eyes. Every visual cue, every sound and scent, heightened the intimacy of their shared space without requiring overt gestures. For a moment, silence settled between them, comfortable yet charged. He could feel the lingering warmth of her hand where it had brushed his, the echo of her laughter still vibrating in the air, and the magnetic pull of her presence, impossible to ignore. The bright room, so ordinary and familiar, became a cocoon of quiet intimacy, where the ordinary act of sharing a laugh transformed into a slow-burning acknowledgement of connection. By the time the laughter subsided, a gentle, unspoken understanding had formed. Their accidental touch and shared amusement had woven a delicate thread of closeness, building tension that was as natural as it was compelling. It was a quiet, luminous moment, a subtle affirmation that the story unfolding between them was no longer just casual visits but the first threads of something deeper, intimate, and profoundly human. The bright afternoon sunlight poured through the wide windows, illuminating the cozy living room in a warm, inviting glow. The 22-year-old man sat on the edge of the sofa, leaning forward slightly, hands resting on his knees, attentive yet careful. Across from him, the 40-year-old American Caucasian widow settled gracefully into a chair, long black hair cascading over her lightly tanned shoulders, subtle freckles catching the light in soft patterns across her cheeks and nose. Her dark brown eyes, framed by gentle laugh lines, held a quiet vulnerability, the kind that made him feel both protective and deeply connected. She wore a flowing cream blouse and beige slacks, the elegance of her posture subtly emphasized by the way the sunlight highlighted her curvy figure. The conversation shifted from light topics to memories of her late husband. She spoke softly, voice carrying the gentle cadence of someone used to reflecting on life's complexities. There was no rush, no dramatic flourish, only a candid honesty that drew him in. He listened with rapt attention, the ordinary quiet of the room becoming an intimate cocoon where every word and pause seemed amplified. The sunlight glinted off her hair, accentuating its shine, and cast delicate shadows across her face, highlighting the depth in her dark brown eyes. As she spoke, her hands rested loosely in her lap, occasionally fidgeting with a delicate bracelet, a subtle signal of the emotional weight behind her words. He noticed these tiny details, the way her fingers flexed slightly, the soft exhale that followed a particularly poignant memory, the curve of her lips as she balanced sorrow with the faint trace of a smile. Each movement carried significance, and he found himself unconsciously leaning closer, drawn to both her presence and the gentle honesty she offered. Their dialogue moved in slow rhythms, punctuated by small pauses that felt intentional, as if each was weighing the other's response and feelings. He offered quiet reassurances, nods, and soft smiles, aware of the warmth radiating from her nearby. The subtle scent of her perfume mingled with the faint aroma of the tea they had set aside, creating a sensory backdrop that made the room feel alive with quiet intimacy. Even in this bright, ordinary space, the tension between them was palpable yet restrained. His heart raced slightly, aware of the pull of attraction tempered by respect and admiration. He noted the slight smile lines at the corners of her eyes, the graceful curve of her shoulders, the gentle tilt of her head as she searched for the right words. Everything about her exuded maturity and confidence, yet the vulnerability in her eyes made the connection feel profoundly human and tender. By the end of this exchange, a new layer of intimacy had formed. The casual familiarity of their visits had evolved into something deeper, an emotional bridge spanning loss, empathy, and quiet curiosity. They shared a silence that felt comfortable yet charged, the kind of moment where two people recognize a mutual understanding that words cannot fully capture. The bright, sunlit room became a vessel for connection, a space where emotional openness, subtle attraction, and deep respect intertwined, leaving both aware that something significant was quietly beginning to bloom between them. This moment of vulnerability established the foundation for their relationship, blending honesty, gentle tension, and warmth into a delicate, YouTube-safe romance that could grow with patience and care. The bright afternoon stretched lazily through the windows, casting a soft glow over the 22-year-old man and the 40-year-old American Caucasian widow as they shared the sofa in her cozy living room. The gentle sunlight caught the long black hair cascading over her lightly tanned shoulders, highlighting the subtle waves and the natural shine that framed her face. Her dark brown eyes, warm and attentive, were focused on him, their depth accentuated by soft laugh lines and the delicate curve of her lips. She wore a light cream blouse and beige pants, the fabric flowing elegantly with her graceful posture. Every movement she made, a slight lean, the casual brushing of her fingers against her own lap, drew his attention, and he felt an awareness of her presence that was almost tangible. A light breeze stirred the curtains, carrying the faint scent of her perfume mixed with the aroma of tea and the soft hints of blooming flowers from outside. He shifted slightly closer, careful not to overstep, but instinctively drawn to the quiet intimacy of the space they shared. Their conversation had become softer, more personal, flowing naturally between stories of everyday life, hopes, and small quirks that made them smile together. Laughter bubbled up occasionally, low and melodic, bridging the space between casual friendship and something unspoken yet powerful. At one point, their hands brushed lightly over the edge of a small blanket she had draped over her lap to ward off a mild afternoon chill. The contact was brief, innocent, yet it left a lingering warmth in his palm and a subtle, fluttering awareness in his chest. He glanced at her, dark brown eyes meeting his, and saw the faint smile that mirrored his own curiosity and enjoyment. It was a shared acknowledgement, a small, delicate touch that carried more meaning than words could convey. The room, filled with bright sunlight reflecting off the pale walls and polished wood floors, felt intimate and safe, a backdrop that made every glance, every gesture, feel magnified. He noticed the subtle details, the gentle curve of her shoulders as she leaned slightly toward him, the relaxed sway of her figure, the way her fingers lingered near his hand for a moment longer than necessary. Even the soft hum of a passing car outside or the distant chirping of birds seemed to enhance the moment, adding a rhythm to the quiet closeness. She laughed softly at one of his comments, a melodic, unhurried sound that made his chest tighten slightly with the sweetness of the connection. In these quiet minutes, there was no need for grand gestures. Every small movement, every shared glance, every brief touch was charged with meaning, building a subtle tension that was both thrilling and comfortable. It was a YouTube-safe intimacy, moments of closeness that were heartfelt, human, and full of emotional depth without crossing boundaries. As the conversation meandered and the sunlight shifted across the room, he realized how natural it felt to be near her, to share space, laughter, and small touches. The bright afternoon light seemed to mirror the warmth in the room, highlighting the unspoken bond forming between them. In this simple, ordinary moment, the slow-burn romance took root, a gentle, patient connection, blossoming quietly yet undeniably, leaving both aware that something significant and tender was unfolding between them. The afternoon light had softened into a warm, honeyed glow, spilling across the hallway as the 22-year-old man rose from the sofa to leave. He walked slowly, acutely aware of the presence of the 40-year-old American Caucasian widow beside him. Her long black hair, catching the sun in soft waves, framed her face with effortless elegance. Lightly tanned skin glowed subtly, accentuated by the golden light filtering through the window, and the faint freckles across her cheeks and nose added to the natural warmth of her expression. Dark brown eyes, framed by soft smile lines and the gentle curve of her lips, held a mixture of warmth, curiosity, and something unspoken that pulled at his attention. She wore a cream blouse and beige pants, the fabric falling gracefully over her curvy figure, giving her a poised and confident presence that was both inviting and quietly commanding. As they approached the door, he noticed the slight hesitation in her step, the subtle shift of her weight from one foot to the other, and the way her hands rested loosely at her sides. Every small movement felt significant, the tilt of her head, the delicate swaying of her shoulders, the gentle flutter of her fingers, and he found himself acutely conscious of the space between them. He hesitated, too, unsure whether to reach out, whether the brush of hands or a lingering glance would be welcome or intrusive. The tension was quiet, understated, but undeniably present, like the taut string of a bow, waiting for release. The hallway was bright, the sunlight illuminating the polished floorboards and casting long, warm shadows that mirrored the lingering emotional tension between them. The faint scent of her perfume mingled with the subtle aroma of the room, creating a sensory impression that felt intimate and compelling. His heart beat faster, a quiet rhythm that echoed the awareness of unspoken attraction, tempered by respect and the shared understanding of boundaries. Her gaze lingered on him, dark brown eyes soft yet intense, conveying warmth, appreciation, and perhaps a hint of longing. He felt drawn to her presence in a way that was both exhilarating and unnerving, each step closer to the door feeling like a negotiation between desire and propriety. The brief, almost accidental brush of their hands as he adjusted his bag left a lingering warmth on his palm, a subtle reminder of the connection building between them. For a moment, silence fell, punctuated only by the distant hum of neighborhood life outside. It was a quiet pause that amplified the intimacy, making every glance, every subtle movement, and every breath feel laden with meaning. The bright environment, far from diminishing the tension, highlighted it. The sunlight caught the shimmer of her hair, the soft glow of her skin, and the attentive, almost tentative way she observed him. As he finally turned to leave, there was a lingering awareness of her presence, a subtle pull that made each step feel measured, deliberate. The hallway, bright and ordinary in appearance, had become a vessel for emotional intensity, where hesitation and awareness intertwined to create a slow-burn intimacy. In that simple, fleeting moment, both recognized the depth of connection forming between them, a bond that was gentle, charged, and quietly magnetic, promising that every subsequent visit would carry this same delicate tension, unspoken yet impossible to ignore. The door closed softly behind him, and the 22-year-old man paused for a moment in the sunlit hallway, the warmth of the afternoon light spilling across the floor and brushing his skin. The bright environment seemed ordinary, yet every detail of the visit lingered in his mind, the sound of her laughter, the subtle scent of her perfume, the gentle sway of her long black hair as she moved with natural grace. The 40-year-old American Caucasian widow's presence had left an indelible mark, her curvy figure poised with effortless elegance, lightly tanned skin glowing in the sunlight, and dark brown eyes that had held both warmth and a quiet intensity, soft laugh lines framing her gaze. Every glance, every gesture, every carefully measured pause during their visit had been a thread weaving the beginnings of a subtle, slow-burning connection. As he walked toward his own apartment, the memory of her hands brushing against his, brief but electric, replayed in his mind. The delicate warmth of her skin had left a tingling trace, a quiet awareness that pulled at him even now. Their laughter, soft and melodic, resonated in his chest, echoing the sense of closeness and trust that had grown between them over a single afternoon. He recalled the accidental touches, the brief moments where proximity had drawn them together, the small, unspoken acknowledgments of mutual understanding, each one a gentle reinforcement of a connection that was blossoming in its own patient, natural way. He thought about the subtle vulnerability she had shared, the soft recounting of memories with her late husband, and the way she had balanced sorrow with a quiet grace. Her honesty, tempered by warmth and light humor, had made him feel seen and appreciated, not as a casual neighbor, but as someone who mattered. The way she had leaned back on the sofa, the faint tilt of her head, the soft curve of her lips as she smiled at his stories, all of it had created an intimacy that was tangible yet perfectly restrained, safe yet thrilling in its subtlety. The bright, sunlit environment had amplified everything, the gentle glow on her skin, the shimmer of her hair, the warmth in her eyes. Even the smallest gestures carried weight, a brief brush of her hand, the way she had tilted her head when listening, the faint fragrance that lingered in the room like an invisible tether. He realized that every ordinary detail, the sunlight spilling over the polished wood floor, the faint hum of the street outside, the softness of the furniture, had been transformed into a backdrop for connection, turning a simple visit into a moment that felt profound and memorable. As he reached the threshold of his own apartment, he turned briefly, recalling the lingering glance she had given him at the door. That moment, subtle yet meaningful, held a quiet promise, a continuation of the bond they had begun to form, a slow-burn intimacy that was patient, respectful, and deeply human. His chest felt full with anticipation, a warmth that mirrored the fading sunlight, a sense that this was only the beginning. Even in the ordinary light of the hallway, he carried the memory of her presence, the laughter, the warmth, the quiet awareness of shared moments, a bright, living thread connecting them. And though the visit had ended, the promise of future encounters, of slow and deliberate closeness, lingered in his mind. It was a gentle, YouTube-safe romance, quietly blossoming, leaving him aware that this connection was just the start of something meaningful, something worth cherishing, and something that would unfold in the bright light of ordinary days ahead.